G'day and welcome back to our ongoing leadership discussions. My name is Eric Perez and I'm recording this leadership podcast on behalf of Melons Australia. Today's guest is the Business Development Manager with SMA Marketing. Can I welcome to the podcast Belinda Boshammer? How are you, mate?
Good, yourself?
Mate, I'm good. So you've agreed to go down this rabbit hole of asking about your leadership journey, and I appreciate your time in doing this. So let's start at the beginning if we can. Your leadership and its beginnings. Where did it all start, mate?
I suppose it started back in 2008. I was working for my family farm. I grew up on a rockmelon farm. So I guess the first step there was part of my summer job and things that I did to pay for uni accommodation was to run our packing shed during the summer holidays. So that was sort of the first foray into horticulture back then. If you went back to 18-year-old me and said you would be working for a melon business when you were in your 30s, 18-year-old me probably would have said you're mad. But but things swing around about. So I went to uni, studied agribusiness. Through that, I was part of the Produce Marketing Association, sort of emerging leaders talent sort of scholarship back then. So that led to my first role at Lamana Bananas, straight out of uni. So I was there for about 3 years, had a bit of a back of the assurance, warehousing, ripening, did some of the warehouses there, and then moved from there to SMA, and that was about 7 years ago now.
You've really done the journey from being on farm to being as part of working as part of the supply chain, and you've had experience outside of the melon industry, but back again, obviously. So just out of curiosity, as you started to go through, did you get a sense that you wanted to go down a track of leadership, or was that something that people tapped you on the shoulder and said, hey, why don't you give this a go? What was that experience for you?
I sort of knew, I guess even back in high school, that was sort of where life was eventually going to take me at some point. So I started doing some work back then, hockey team captain, equestrian team captain, did some work when I was in year 12, helping, year 8 boarding school students adjust to life in boarding. So I thought that would provide me some skills. I was a fairly naturally shy person. So I was like, you need to upskill in this, otherwise life's going to be a little bit difficult. So it sort of started there. And I guess from, joining the workforce at Lamana to where I am now, it was opportunities that came up and I just kept going with it. I didn't really want to pass anything up. So that's how I've ended up where I am now.
Yeah, no, that's great. As you've come through, Belinda, it looks like you've worked along the supply chain for melons and understand, I guess, the harvest component and the post-harvest component. I'm using some language here from the fishing industry, but I think it works for this conversation as well. Can I ask, in that time, and this relates to your leadership and its beginnings, as you went through that process, there may have been people that asked you to move up in the world. Was that something that you saw happening, or was it a mix of that and you wanting to do better in your roles and move up the ladder, so to speak?
Yeah, it was a bit of both. So me constantly pushing myself, and especially fresh out of uni, I was constantly annoying managers. Give me more. I want more work. Give me more responsibility. So it was a little bit of both. And, people saying, oh, this opportunity has come up. Do you want it? And me saying, yeah, sure, no worries, let's go.
I think that's a good way to signal to those that are higher up the tree that you want to do things and you don't want to stay where you are. So that's good to hear. Belinda, let me ask you about the linkage there between leadership and management. So do you see a difference between those skill sets?
I guess so. Management is, I suppose, management of a thing, so of the business itself, whereas leadership is really about the people in the business and around the business and how you interact with them. Is sort of how I see the difference between those two.
And if I can ask, in terms of your pathway to be becoming, and now that you in the leadership roles that you've had, where do you think your natural fit is, in the management space or leadership space?
Oh, that's a good one. It's probably more the leadership because, while they are different, one sort of feeds the other. So I sort of tell some of the people around me at SMA, melons are just a theme. It's not really what we do. What we do is just engaging different to, achieve whatever outcome we need, whether it's just pickers or growers or customers. It's more about them than it is about the watermelons even. They're just the thing that we sell.
Oh, okay. Okay. So moving to not necessarily the product, but the people that you're dealing with. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So Belinda, the next topic area I'd like to bring up is and I didn't coin the phrase, but it's definitely out there and it's worth exploring. This idea of a lonely road of leadership. Now, have you found that to be the case for you, or is that pathway as lonely as you make it?
I think a little bit of both, particularly when you first, I guess, get into your first big leadership role. You have to go through a bit of a learning experience where you may deal with a bunch of people. Like, I think the last time I counted, it was over 90 people that I would deal with throughout a year that I have to, I guess, their needs I have to meet in some way. And when you first start, it's easy to forget yourself in all of that. And if you don't take the time to look after yourself and do the things that you need to recharge, that can get really hard. But you have to go through the process of realizing that, I actually do need to take a bit of time for myself here, and then learn how to manage those 90 or whatever people as well as yourself.
Yeah. Okay. So extending the question just a little, in terms of your decision-making process as a leader, is that something that you've had to work on over time to get over this idea of loneliness, like bring people in, or are you happy to make the decision that needs to be made without much of a need to go out to others to get a bit of an alternate perspective, as it were?
It sort of depends on the decision. Early on, some of even the more basic sort of decisions I needed a little bit of help with. And then as I've got a bit older, I know what I can do and then where I need to engage with others. And I always try to make sure that all of the big decisions I am, bringing everyone along with me, so that it's not just my decision. It has to be everyone. We have to be sort of in the same boat, rowing it all together.
Belinda, measuring success. Now, this particular one is not just around the monetary success, and obviously that's an important one because you're not in business to fail. But are there any other measures of success as they relate to leadership in your experience?
I think it sort of comes down to people's mental well-being around you. Are you finding yourself in a situation where people are feeling at least the same or feeling better after talking to you, or is it the opposite? So I think that's sort of where you become successful, because if you do all of that and people are happy to deal with you, the success kind of comes with it.
Couldn't disagree with that. So let me ask you, is the success of your team a measure of success for you beyond the KPIs or not?
Probably it really is a KPI, that they're engaged in what they're doing, they're feeling good about the situation that they're in, they're happy with the team. It's sort of, to me, that's the first step. You need to have them happy, have them feeling good about themselves, and have all the resources that they need, and the rest follows on from there.
So let's talk about leader capability. So you've been able to work along that supply chain. In your travels, Belinda, what do you see as a critical leader capabilities based on your experiences, mate?
The critical ones are treating other people well, understanding their needs. One of the things that I look at is, okay, what does this person's boss want from them? Is if you can understand that, you can understand a lot of where they're coming from and what they need, and not treating people poorly. And also, I guess, understanding your own market, understanding your product. You can have all the people skills in the world, but you still need to know your product and know what people want from you and be able to meet those requirements.
So you're talking then about ability to learn, so that market knowledge type skill set. Yeah, okay, no, that's great. Okay, let's talk nature versus nurture. So this is a question all the guests for this particular series have been asked. And are leaders born or are they made, Belinda?
I think there's a little bit of both in that as well. Some people you'll see that others naturally just follow them. No matter what they do, people will follow. And then other times there are people that have had to work at it. So I think it can be a combination of both, and one isn't necessarily worse than the other.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I get where you're coming from with that. Yeah. So what I mean in asking this particular question of guests is not about that there's a right or wrong answer, is that I believe most people will come at it's a mixture of two. Now, whether that's 70-30 or 30-70 one way or the other,
Yeah.
really matter, because I've yet to meet someone that says it's all of one or all of the other. But I guess those people exist. I haven't met them yet, but I'm sure that they're out there. My personal view for what this is worth is I agree with you. I think it has to be a mix of both, because as much as this is not scientific to say, there are people that have a certain skill set that makes them very good leaders, and it was something they were never trained in. But then again, you've probably met people that have had a lot of training and experience and are excellent leaders because of that training and experience. So to say it's one or the other is a bit extreme, and so no right or wrong answer there. So I appreciate that, mate. Yeah. All right, so here's where we get a little bit more granular if we can. And this next area is talking about your pathway in two respects. So let me ask the first bit of that. Looking back, what have you learnt from your leadership pathway? What are your takeaways at this point in your career about leadership?
Yeah, I think don't be afraid to have a go at some things. Be measured in what you're trying to achieve and have your plan. Know what you want to achieve and take the little steps to get there. Even if they are only tiny ones, you don't have to take big giant leaps to get to the end goal. Just keep nibbling away at it. And knowing your limitations a little bit too, and being able to say, you know what, I can't do all of this. I need someone else to do it. Don't wear yourself out trying to get to some sort of goal, because if you're worn out when you get there, you're not going to achieve what you need to.
Yeah, excellent. Okay. So the second part of this particular question is, what do you believe is critical in terms of leadership and leader development going forward? So a slight bit of crystal ball gazing here, but definitely worth asking you because you're in the industry. So maybe we couch this in terms of, what do you think are the opportunities coming up versus what do you think are still the challenges there when you're talking about developing people?
I think probably over the next few years, we're going to see things like mental health and safety policies come into business, and getting into that more psychological side of managing people where probably we haven't really worried about that. And particularly lately with COVID, I think people have really understood that, hey, we have to nurture our people mentally, physically, to get the best out of them and not just leave them there just sort of swimming around and hoping that they figure it out.
That's a challenge or opportunity. What would you rate that? Or is it both?
I think it's a little bit of both.
Right. Okay.
It is both.
Yeah, that's interesting. This is one of the first types of conversation I've had around leadership where psychological safety and OH&S has been brought up. Now, do you come to this realization, and it's amazingly good insight? Is it what you've seen from others reacting to COVID? Is it a bit of your experience that you're seeing across industry? What kind of brought you to this realization, if I can ask?
It's a bit of both. You sort of could see it coming probably 4 or 5 years ago, where there was a lot of people being pushed into the psychological sciences and more people understanding mental health and it not being such a stigma. But a lot of the people that you talk to currently, like now, whether they're admitting it or not, are quite stressed. And I think that's brought a lot of attention to how people are really feeling. We're all at home, we're isolated. There's a lot of uncertainty. Nobody really knows what our future is. We can sort of guess it, but people don't have the freedoms that they felt they used to. And it's starting quite an emotional toll, and you can see it in a lot of people that you do talk to if they're really being honest.
If we can maybe continue to chat a little bit, because I've got a couple of questions here. From a practical point of view, Belinda, do you believe that the skill sets for leaders are to become more aware of what psychological safety is and what OH&S is, or moving away from awareness to more practical professional development in those spaces as leaders? Or where do you see this lying? And again, we're only crystal ball gazing here, so there definitely isn't a right or wrong here. So where do you think this lies?
Yeah, I think really developing people and helping them, I guess, understand, well, not so much understand, but helping people manage this very connected life we have with our work. We're starting pre-COVID where everybody had their phones on them all the time, their computers come home, all of that sort of stuff. But managing the mental workload of business, I think. Yeah, managing the mental workload of what they're doing and helping people I guess as they get more responsibility in their job, dealing with the mental impacts that come with it. And I think mental health and safety policies will come into it, but as well as just trying to develop people mentally and within their careers.
So that's leader to team members or everyone in the business? Do you see that as specifically looking after your team and their development, or is that also a leadership set of training that needs to happen if it's not already happening?
Yeah, I think it already is starting to happen, but I think there will be more of it come through in the next few years as people understand that looking after that side of people can basically lead to better productivity and more workplace happiness, and all of those things eventually lead to better revenue for the business.
Before I forget, I haven't asked my other guests in this podcast series, but definitely we'll start asking this question now, and it will be well worth exploring with the next guest is the reality that COVID-19 has had an impact on how we do work. From a melons industry perspective, and you bring a unique view to this like my other guests, do you believe that leadership and how you develop your leaders will change under the COVID model, or is it business as usual?
I think it will change a little bit into developing more into the mental health side of it. But, a lot of it will still be business as usual. We still have to achieve all of the things that we had to. It's just that we're probably going to be a little bit more aware of our impact on the other people around us.
Belinda, appreciate your time and sharing your views on this issue. It's not that there's not a correct answer, because there's not. It's only people's views of this. And I do appreciate your time and the perspective you brought to the discussion, mate. Thank you very much.
No worries. Thank you, Eric.
For those listening, this has been the Melons Australia Leadership Podcast Series. Thank you for joining us again, and we'll catch everyone on the next podcast.